Hello, guys. Welcome back to Behind the Counter, presented by Kaistring. I'm your host, Vicente Yanez. This is the podcast where we take you behind the scenes of retail technology to know more about the insights, the trends, the thoughts of the people who live and breathe this every day. Yep. So there is few things more confusing than when you are at the store, having your arms full of merchandise, ready to go to that front slick-looking kiosk, only for the screen to freeze, or worse, have a system updating bar just crawling across the screen. And in that moment, the brand's multi-million checkout experience investment just goes to hell. The retailers tend to put a lot of emphasis on the front-end development of things, but the last mile of that experience runs over thin ice. Today with us, we have people who work on that last mile that make sure that the retailers do not break that thin ice. Here with us, we have Keith Szot, Chief Evangelist, and Daniil Krets, Senior Director of Partnerships at Esper. How are you guys?
Doing good. Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
last day of the show. It's been quite a show, so ready for today.
So, Keith, Chief Evangelist.
Yes.
I love that title.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
It reflects my journey with Esper, where I joined the company when we were in our seed stage, and we had no customers and really no product at that point in time.
Okay.
And it's jumping in with the founders to help get the wheel turning, get the business going. Daniil's been with the company for quite a long time too. And so through that journey, I had pretty much every role at the company except being an engineer.
Okay.
And so that gave me deep perspective
Right.
on what we do and how we do it. And also, too, being able to integrate with this very complex ecosystem
Right.
that we live in with all the different customer types, use cases, partner types. So from that, I fill a role where I basically help the company do what it needs to do wherever it needs to be done.
Would you say that your role is more internal or external?
It is a combination of both, interestingly enough. You would think that evangelism would be something that would be completely external and
Right.
And at many companies it is, but for me, it is really about taking the input from the outside world and injecting it into our internal world. So there's a big internal aspect involved in being an evangelist as well.
I love that. That's a two-way communication.
It's a two-way communication.
Catch
Yeah.
those signals, bringing them in, and then let me tell you what we do and how we can be.
Yep.
How can you do better with what we offer here?
And also, too, how can we be better?
Absolutely.
to offer
Yes.
better.
Yes.
So, yes.
Daniil, question for you. What would you say is one thing that your clients think they need a lot, but whenever, based on your guys' experience and your partner's experience, they might not, that you want to reframe it or refocus them?
Very good question. First thing that comes to mind is AI and automation,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of conversations here on the floor about this today. I feel like everyone, I think I'm going to go with the example that you provided at the beginning of our conversation, right? Like you have a experience where you're at the self-checkout kiosk, right? And it seems to be a very basic part of the process,
Right.
And a lot of companies are chasing the shiny things,
Yes.
but they don't pay a lot of attention to the basic part of the process.
Right.
Checkout, their experience, how their hardware works in the field, right? And this is what we and our partners take care of, right?
Right.
When I was on a lot of different teams in my journey at Esper, and most recently joined the partner team, and what I'm seeing is we are at every step of the process when customers are deploying the hardware,
Right.
And without, you need a partner, you need a group of partners that will take the idea to reality,
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so we see that every time, right? Folks see nice shiny new hardware, they want a new POS system, they want software, but they don't think through the process all the way
Yep.
from beginning to the end. And
Yep.
so they need a deployment partner that will be on the ground and make sure everything works, and then they need support,
Yep.
right? And so it's a very complex thing, right? And so I feel like a lot of companies in the industry, a lot of brands really chase the shiny new things, but
Yeah.
that takes away from the basic stuff that in retailers in the retail space the customers expect on a
Yes.
daily basis
Yes.
to work and function, right? So we all see the frozen screens, right? The non-functioning payment systems, and every day in retail, right? So this is how I answer your question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes
okay.
I think the goals are wrong. Like for me, the term that bothers me is frictionless.
Okay.
And for better or for worse, there's always going to be friction in the retail experience.
100%, yes.
And in fact, you want certain times of friction because they create the experience. Like, would you consider talking to a human that represents a brand in the store experience to be friction? In an AI perspective, you could, but that's part of the experience that retailers need to create to have that stickiness to get people into the store.
Build that loyalty, build that presence of brand in your mind.
Yeah, and I feel like in a way AI, especially agentic AI, is trying to programmatize that.
Yep.
Right. And I experiment a lot with AI. I have my little host of agents that do things for me, and I see it every day.
Yeah.
It's not always right. It comes in with the wrong outcome.
Yeah.
And that creates tension in the experience that you're trying to create as a retailer. And I circle that back around to when I look at Esper and what we do, and we get asked this question all the time. How are you different as an MDM, right? MDM is a very commodity space.
It is.
And we are very focused on customer outcomes, holding hands with partners to get it done.
Right.
And that comes with rollout, but that also comes when these devices are out in the field, and that's where observability and telemetry such that you can take action is very, very important. And that type of telemetry that we get operating these fleets and these devices are going to be an important part, we believe, of how you run these AI systems in the future.
Agreed. I see with the AI bubble right now, and just to pivot on that one for a moment,
Yeah.
to me, I think what is going to come down to it is models that are smaller, that can be trained faster, and hardware that can run at the edge.
Yep.
I think these big platforms centralized are good for showcasing, are our demo of it. They are the NRF version of AI. But once you get it back home, once you get it to an actual use case, you need to consider a million other things. What you were mentioning, Daniil. There is not just, okay, can it answer my question more or less right? I needed to run safely, I needed to run fast, I needed to be secure, I needed to run in a location that is super remote in the middle of a 2-lane road somewhere in the Midwest, right?
Yep.
How do you do that? That's the question that I think is going to come down to all of the retailers to start thinking about it. But to your point, Daniil, whenever we also Kitchen does a lot of the integrations and implementations, right, with selection studies and that, and we find very similar things. Like they ask, the retailers want the shiny new thing. Hey, I really like this thing that the demo show me. Okay, now let us help you get from A to B, because it's never a matter of I went to sleep today with my hardware, and tomorrow my store is gonna wake up with a new hardware, with a shiny new kiosk. No. There is a transition period, and then what happens when it breaks and that. So I totally agree with that, align with that.
But cloud-based is not a bad thing right now to experiment, right? Because you need to figure it out.
Yep.
Is it robust enough to survive in production environments over long periods of time? Well, why do you have cache boxes that sit there and do transactions that sit on-prem?
Yeah.
Well, because the cloud, you can get disconnected.
Yep.
And so that same type of robust infrastructure is going to need to be in place for AI to take off in the retail environment.
Agreed. What are you guys, going back on frictionless?
Yeah.
If you had a magic wand that you can just wave, what would be one friction point that you would remove or translate somewhere else?
I was thinking about the point you made about the transition period, right? I feel like you're taking the idea of what the new experience should look like, be it a kiosk, self-checkout, any hardware deployment, to the reality takes a lot of time.
Right.
And we see that all the time, right? Where retail environment, restaurant environment is very complex. It functions 24/7 for the most part, right? So when you think about it, like deploying 100 to 100 devices in the field, it seems like it's not a big deal, right? But it actually takes a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of small different parts of the project that need to be deployed in different stores, and it's all very distributed, right? So to me, I think that's the most complex part, right? Like procuring the hardware, choosing the software is, you can do that in the office on a Zoom call, right?
100%.
Getting it actually deployed in the field is probably the most complex part to me.
And it's a very human-centered action, right? Because you need someone to go in and unplug the box and plug the new one. I'll give you quickly one crazy story. I work on engineering side, application development. Yeah. And from a client, we were in the free spirit, which is this time of the year, or this holiday period, right?
Right.
We were needed to deploy some changes like before hitting Black Friday. So those ones were heavily scrutinized. We have, the cap review every week. Someone had to go and present their change and justify why it needed to go out. But the problem of that execution was that they decided that every change that would touch the store needed to go through cap. And there was 1 week in which we were, presenting our changes, and then comes someone from field support, and the guy is like, I need to replace a power unit. Like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why my management told me to sit in this meeting because I need to replace a power unit. The CAF person, okay, can you explain to us why that's needed now in the production? Because the power unit is down. It broke, and I need to put a new one. Okay, what is your rollback plan? There is no rollback plan because the old power unit does. The guy was getting frustrated for that one.
Right.
Just made me think of that human factor. Like whenever the process needs to account for that, and it's a separate process. Like to me, that should never have happened because it's not software development. Has nothing to do with it.
Yep.
That should be handled through a partner or through a different mechanism altogether. I don't know. It's just a crazy situation that happened. I was just laughing and on mute on that meeting at the time.
Unneeded friction, yeah. For me, it's self-checkout and kind of nailing consistency across that experience. Like I had a weird one. I travel a lot, right? So I go to these little boutiques at the airport, and I remember trying to scan an item, and it was reading the QR code instead of the barcode, right? And so
Interesting.
the fidelity of the system wasn't designed to be bulletproof as a consumer, because I'm a consumer. Now, the packager of the item put the QR code right next to the barcode. So to me, it's like, all right, you probably should have put it somewhere else. But it took me, a fairly technically sophisticated person, a few tries before I'm like, oh, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Put my finger over the QR code. I can check out my item. And so that shows that unintended friction is being created through the self-checkout process.
Yep.
And there's a lot of variability as retailers figure out how they can optimize, basically loss versus efficiency through the self-checkout process. That said, I still like self-checkout better, but
I
that's
agree.
my
I'm
problem.
with you. I'm with you. I like to be taken care of take care of my own things, of the things that I go in the store. But whenever we talk with people about the self-checkouts and computer vision and what are the features that they're trying to bring in for reducing doing loss prevention, they mention a lot of the things that they need to do to balance that friction, right? To balance that customer inconvenience for security of the brand or the retailer.
Yep.
So I think that, back to your necessary friction, that's one that has to stay at least for a little bit until we figure out other ways to shop. And that has to do with culture, not so much with technology, right? The culture of the places that you're going, where are your brands, demographics, the location. I know there is a lot of other dimensions to that problem that have not necessarily nothing to do with technology. I think.
So Daniil, what are you? Are you self-checkout or clerk?
I'm both.
Okay. How do you decide?
I like talking to a human.
Okay.
I think I like the regular experience, but I think we all see that the retailers are super understaffed these days. So self-checkout is kind of a necessary evil to me, right?
It's part of the flow.
From the things that you guys have seen out there, because you work with a lot of the other stuff that is not the software and even the main point of sale, but just not the software.
Yeah.
What is one quiet piece of technology that is making the biggest change that a lot of people probably do not think about?
For me, it is RFID.
Okay.
And a lot of this, and this goes back to the AI example too. Sure. You need edge processing for AI to be available before you can start to perform AI on-prem, right? And I think the same is true with RFID, where it's been around a long time, but it is being packaged in a way that it's just going to be a standard feature of every consumer device.
Right.
And based on the enabling silicon that contains it, it's going to be designed into the type of devices with the hardware refresh cycle that we see too. And I don't think people understand how that's going to change things. Let's roll it back to self-checkout. If every item has an RFID tag in it, where they're now able to print it on a label that you apply, you can now have, a higher level of visibility into whoever's doing self-checkout.
Right.
What are they moving through it? I think the other aspect that triggered me is it's going to become social. And what I mean by that is you buy an item and that is your item.
Sure.
And you decide how you share that. And this is primarily in Europe, right?
Sure.
With the Euro 27 initiative around RFID, that you can start to flow these individual discrete product experiences into the social sphere.
Okay.
How that will play out, I don't know, but I kind of see that coming, that things are going to change a lot, and the proliferation of RFID is going to be a big driver of that for a different set of industry and consumer experiences, likely that we're not expecting.
And we were talking a little bit before this about the possible of a economy based on content creation.
Yes.
But I mean that right now in 2026, that sounds like a crazy idea.
Yep.
And I put the date because if it does happen later on in 2027, we can come back to this podcast and say what we were thinking at the time. We did not know better.
Well, you could also be a professional podcaster, right?
Yeah, by then
Yeah.
it will be, and then we can come back to this one in another podcast. And hey guys, remember when we were thinking that this was not going to happen?
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
But thinking about the social experiences, we are seeing also that retail is changing based on those trends, based on how we think the store. The store is no longer just a separate place or the location that I need to stop by to get my groceries just so I can continue my life. Now retailers are part of that life. E-commerce, omni-commerce, or all of these initiatives in which we're trying to integrate the purchase of an item, the commodity of buying something as part of your daily life.
Yeah,
Yep.
Right?
It's all the way to the item. Too,
Yes.
Right. Like you see the items that are being sold, the packaging. Right. They're all from this social media.
Right.
A lot of influencers
Yes.
are driving what we're buying today. So,
I mean, I didn't think about this, but like how many, just here on the floor, how many cameras are around?
Oh, they're everywhere.
oh yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, not just the security ones, like just people generating content, right? So what does that do to an item experience? If I'm buying this thing, it's no longer just the item or the narrative that the brand wants to push for marketing on that item. Now it's what each individual person does and connects with that individual item.
Right.
That is fascinating.
It's a lifestyle experience.
Yeah, yeah. What about you? What is the piece that you think like, man?
I'm going to go to the restaurant industry because we do a lot of work in the restaurant
Sure.
industry, and I think there is you see a lot of, but going back to your point about the things that we don't see, right? I think back of the house kitchen experience and kitchen hardware and systems that are in place today, there's a lot of innovation, right?
Right.
Because like front of the house, like we're all used to point of sale system,
Sure.
self-checkout kiosk at this point, and I feel like there's a lot happening behind the scenes,
Yep.
right? So kitchen automation, robotics,
Right, right.
like there's a lot of innovation in that space to basically automate some parts of the processes that happen in the back of the house and the kitchen that are quite fascinating.
Yeah, and there's crossover there. And so what I mean is one big challenge for restaurants are digital orders that come in.
Yes.
And how
Yes.
do you manage the kitchen flow? And I have personally experienced this where you get, quick serve that's too emphasized towards digital.
Right.
And that means that your in-restaurant experience as a human that just comes in sucks.
Yeah.
And so getting that balance right is very important. And this happens with kitchen displays and the
Agreed.
algorithms
Yeah.
that are associated with them. And there's a lot of innovation going on in that realm.
Agreed.
This translates to retail, that retailers are kind of doing the same things. Like some of these locations are almost distribution centers now,
Yeah.
where people order online and they go and they get fulfillment there. And how do you balance those two experiences of just a walk-in person that wants to experience the retail environment versus somebody that literally is going there to pick up a bag that
Right.
they ordered online? And so I think we're going through a period where we're figuring it out. It's interesting that to me, from scale, the restaurant industry is ahead of this. And it's being driven by a very innovative set of ISVs that are creating solutions around this. And I expect that the same thing will flow into retail to try to figure that out.
And I think it does because, some of the convenience store space, a lot of their business proposal has to do with their kitchen proposal, right?
Yep.
Right.
One thing is fuel. Okay, everyone needs gas, for now anyway. But what is your differentiator as a company or as a brand? Who's your identity? A lot of them rely on their food. We have several of our customers that are in the C-store space, and kitchen is a crucial part of it.
Yep.
Like you said,
So
like
much innovation there. Yeah.
point of sale, sure, we can talk about that every day.
Yeah.
But what are you gonna do with my kitchen?
Yeah.
Because I cannot stop that, right? Everyone knows me because of my famous sandwich, because of my famous product.
Yep.
Like, I don't want to disturb that.
Yeah.
It's a really
Yeah,
great point.
I think C-stores are going through that transformation right
Yeah.
now because a lot of emphasis is put on the kitchen,
Yep.
right? And how does your kitchen display system talk to your POS?
Yes.
Right? And
Yes.
I think it's a bit tough for them because it's more straightforward for the restaurants because they've been living and breathing this,
Yeah.
right? And
Coming
we
up
see
with this
a
idea.
lot of new projects in that space
Right.
on our end as well.
Oh, I love C-Store because it's this blend of restaurant, retail, throw in some fuel. So it is a very complex environment to operate.
One of our favorite use case, or my favorite use case, is something similar to that. Like, how do you connect three different systems? the order integrator versus the kitchen system versus the point of sale. Because to me, for example, they should be disconnected. They're disconnected in the sense
They need to
conceptually,
operate.
architecturally.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You cannot be a jack of all trades because in the end you're going to fail at it, or you're going to become a monolith so huge that you are not going to be able to move fast. And that it's all about speed and delivery to market, right? So having these disparate systems allow you to have specialization. But then comes the added component, which is the integration. How do you make these things work? And a lot of that integration sometimes happens having the right technology in place, but sometimes having the right devices in place.
Yep.
Because if you try to go in with your current hardware setup or hardware footprint, this is not going to work. I'm sorry, but you're missing these capabilities, you're missing these security levels. I don't know. Something that the retailer, I know it's disappointing to tell them you have to invest in new hardware, but also bring it that narrative like you're investing for the next 10 years of your life, right?
We live that all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
How do you do that conversation, because in for example, in demos or gathering your board, it's easy to sell them a UI because they can see it, versus trying to sell them something abstract, which is a process or a mindset or a culture change in some cases.
Keith, you want to?
Yeah, sure. I look at us as trusted advisors.
Sure.
For us, given what we do, we have a broad perspective of hardware and also look at it from enabling and roadmap of where the industry is going to go. So I would say as part of the engagement with Esper, again, very focused on outcomes, is how do we help the prospect or the customer make good decisions on hardware. I mean, I'll give you the extreme is like occasionally we get a prospect that comes in that wants a very, very cheap device, right? They get, kind of lured by that. Oh, I can get a smartphone that I can use for $50 and you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And you have to look at the total cost of ownership associated with operating such a device in the field. And so it really is kind of providing a framework through discussion and conversation, because also too they're a prospect of ours, and right, we have to be careful because we want to land them as a customer.
Absolutely.
But it really is that advisement to give them perspective to think things through that happens really at the frontline pre-sales process, and our sales engineers are very key for that.
Yeah.
Right, and so sales engineering is very, very important for us because that's where a lot of the key decisions are made.
Right.
The problems are identified and hopefully they're solved before the project gets going.
Yeah, I agree. Sales engineering, now that you mention it, it's a term that I don't know how long it's been around, but the fact that engineering is blending out from just the fungus developer or mushroom developer that you just like put in a closet, close the door, and then you get software out. And someone told me that analogy. It's like, yeah, that's exactly how we operate. But now engineering is bleeding out, and the conversation of technology is having these different layers. That's fascinating, fascinating and somewhat scary also, because now every person that sits in the room to have a conversation with us as consultant or partners need to have a level of technology literacy.
Yep.
To understand some of the things, right? And sales engineering, I feel like it does a lot of that bridge between what these highly technical details translating it into impact, into the things that you as a business partner, as an executive director, have to know, care about for the health of a company.
Yep.
Yeah, I think scalability is important, right? Like going back to like our conversation about like deployment is complex, device is complex too.
Yeah.
Like what is the chipset?
Yeah.
Right? Like what are the specs?
Yeah.
Is this enough today, or is this going to be enough for you 10 years later?
Right.
So I think sales engineering actually is key because they ask those questions and they help our customers plan ahead.
Right.
Because we see this so many times where, especially as a startup, we have conversations early on when someone is releasing a new product and putting together a solution, and they go for the cheap solutions or cheap components, be it hardware or software, right? And then 2 years later, they run into a situation where they deployed a couple hundred devices, and they come back to us and say, okay, this is not scalable, right? And so we see this all the time where like the first couple hundred devices in the deployment, an OEM offers, for example, an out-of-the-box MDM solution just to fill the gap.
Right.
They go with it because it's cheap, or they throw in it for free. And when they reach that 500,000 device threshold, they start seeing issues when it comes to scalability. They don't know what the device does. They don't know what this particular group does. Or
Right.
they haven't thought about the structure.
Right.
And so they have this group of devices in one location, and there's another one, and they need apps in different groups.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Different apps in different groups. Right.
Yeah.
So it's very complex, especially in the retail and QSR environment. So we see this all the time. And going back to your point, right, I think that internal is bleeding into external,
Yeah.
and that expertise is being shared actively with the customers because,
Yep.
technical sophistication is now table stakes. Right?
Yes,
You have to be
yes.
able to have an intelligent conversation and share those experiences, because this is why, especially in this industry, our customers come to us.
And
Yes.
and what you mentioned, like having this disparate landscape of hardware in your field, in your chain out there, having to take a look at 15 different MDM solutions because the OEM gave me their platform, their solution. Like if I'm IT support, having to log in into each one of those just to monitor my fleet, that sounds painful. Like to me, that's where a partner like you guys come into place, and like, okay, you can help me have a very visibility, a very traceability of what's going on out there, without having to deal with that many. Does that sound like the realm
Yeah,
that you guys
and
play ball
that's a
in?
differentiator for us, because I think we are focused on mission-critical, dedicated use cases.
Right.
So POS, KDS,
Right.
all of the hardware, back of the house, front of the house, retail hardware. And in that scenario, you need visibility across a variety of different devices.
Yes.
Right? There's no way you have one and the same, like several pieces of hardware that is completely exactly the same, with the same version of the OS, right?
Agreed.
Same specs, running in the store. It's all very complex. So we provide that single pane of glass experience where we're device agnostic, we're OS agnostic,
Right.
we're OS version agnostic. Right? So that allows you to combine all of the bits and pieces of your solutions,
Yep.
stitch them all together in a group, and treat them as a group, as a single store.
And the part that he's hiding there, which is really important, and this is the thing that bugs me about software companies sometimes, is they create a problem that permeates through all the consumers of the software, right? So whether it's a bug or a feature gap, when you put it out there, that means any party that is developing a solution off of that has to deal with that particular issue.
Yes.
And it's kind of our job to take care of that for our customers, to abstract that away for them.
Right.
So whether it's an Android version jump,
Sure.
whether it is variant hardware, like we're big in Android open source, which is a bit unusual for standard MDMs. We love the open source project because retailers and restaurateurs can see the value of it. But we, of course, support the Google GMS
Sure.
system as well. That's why we did Windows, Linux, iOS. And we do the work so that they can have as consistent as possible
Yeah.
control plane
Sure.
across all these different variants that they'll encounter, whether it's the hardware BOM, whether it's the particular OS version. It doesn't matter, as best as we can do it.
Yeah.
Because it's not perfect, right?
Yeah.
But
There's
it's
always something.
Yes, because there's always an evolving landscape. There's always
Yeah.
new technology. There's always something happening, right? We see this in application development. Every day there's a new vulnerability discovered, a new version of a library, and
Yep.
you're always having to plan for that upgrade,
Yep.
for that change forward. But you bring in a very interesting point, because that's something that we bring into the conversation. Also, I want you to think on what's the operating system of the things that you have in the store, because suddenly you are not just thinking of having a box that runs this application. You also need to maintain the operating system that is running on and handle any patches, any service, any security flaws,
Yep.
anything, right? So it's not just the idea of the store server. Now it's the idea of the store server maintenance and lifetime and all of that. So it's a very interesting dimension to bring in, and having partners with you, like you guys, have that conversation with them is just terrific.
That's what we think about and do all the time.
Yes. Just getting close to wrap up, I have one
Ah.
more question for you.
Okay.
What's one myth that you would like to bust about the industry that you guys work in?
Mythbusters here.
Yeah.
We have a good answer.
Why don't you go for the answer first? It seems like you
Is
got
there
something.
anything that normally your clients come in with a huge misconception and they're like, let's start here?
I would say the difference between AOSP, the open source project, and Google Mobile Services, the GMS. That's one that we run into all the time, where there is a lot of marketing around these things, so to speak, right? And I think it's very important for the customer to understand the type of solution that they're rolling out and the trade-offs that are made between choosing something that's GMS versus based in the open source. Right? And so, and so that's one that you kind of need to dive into, because you get customers that come in and they say, hey, I want open source. It may not be right for them. GMS may be better for them depending on how they handle their application. Right? Like maybe their application development group is very up on Play services, right? And using Play Store in order to update the app is fine for their particular use case. And then we see it on the other end where they're dead set on GMS. And when you dig into the solution that they build, it's not necessarily the best fit for them for what they need to do in their business.
Pushing this square peg in the round hole or whatever.
Because somebody up there said I need to do this. Right? So that's the big one for me.
We deal with this all the time.
Yeah.
I think the example I'm going to go with is the Android security. Right? So
you mean it's insecure? So they say, right?
That's what they say.
It's actually really secure, but
and I think I've been with the company for almost 5 years, and like when I just started, that has been a conversation we used to have quite a bit. Right? Now, I feel like everyone is trusting the Android OS a little bit more these days.
Google's done a good job with that.
Like if you just walk around the floor, there's a lot of OEMs that are still 80% Windows, right? Like Windows is still very, very important in this industry, which is why we rolled it out. Like it's not because this is the future; it's because you have to have it at the enterprise.
With you,
level,
100%.
Right?
Yes.
But you see, like if you walk around, if you come here, probably next year, you'll see more and more
migration
OEMs migrating to Android. Right? And
I like that.
It's at the core of Esper. We started with Android, and Keith pointed out, like we love the open source.
Right.
It's very versatile. You can build anything you want, and we do this for some of our customers for very interesting use cases where they need to completely lock everything down and design the way they need for their use cases.
Right.
So Android gives you that capability.
As a developer, I love open source. That's the bread and butter for proper software development. I'm sorry, other software developers that may like closed platforms, but I do believe there is a huge value in community engagement and community support developing technology.
I think we're going to see it around Edge AI.
100%.
The reality of the way it's set up is that there's not a lot of infrastructure on open source for AI, and Google is building elegant infrastructure into Play services relative to AI. So it's interesting that I think it's going to be a Linux versus Google GMS decision for retailers that are looking to deploy at the edge with AI. And that means that Linux is going to kind of spark up.
Yes.
That is a very smooth infrastructure with all the tooling available for AI on the edge. And so to me, that's the most exciting thing to watch, is that how is that going to play out?
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I want to thank you very much for the time and being here in this conversation. I really love it. Any final thoughts that you want to share?
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
No,
it's a pleasure. I think we had a really good conversation. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Very enjoyable visit, Vicente. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it, guys.
All right.
Thank you very much. See ya.
Thank you, guys.